There's a voice that doesn't target everyone. It finds specific people. The ones who feel too much. The ones who notice what others miss. The ones who've been told their whole lives that they're too sensitive. This voice knows exactly where to strike. It takes the worst memory, the failure, the rejection, the thing that still stings years later, and replays it on loop. It whispers, "This is who you really are. You'll never escape this." Psychologists call it the inner critic. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Stranger Things calls it Vecna. And here's what most people miss. This voice doesn't target you because you're weak. It targets you because of what you'd become if you ever stop believing it. A Netflix show about kids fighting monsters somehow mapped this psychological mechanism with unusual precision, and the research behind it reveals something important about why certain people are targeted, and what happens when they finally break free. This video breaks down 3 things. First, the psychology of why this voice targets specific people, based on Dr Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive people. Second, the transformation pattern that appears across mythology, psychology, and trauma research, and why most people get stuck at the same stage. Third, what happens when someone actually completes this process, and why researchers call the result post-traumatic growth. To understand why the voice exists, we first need to understand who it chooses, and why. In 1991, psychologist Elaine Aron began researching a trait she would eventually call sensory processing sensitivity. Her research found that approximately 15 to 20% of the population processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than average. These individuals, sometimes called highly sensitive people or HSPs, don't just experience events, they absorb them. This isn't a disorder, it's a trait found in over 100 species, from fruit flies to primates. Biologically, it's a survival strategy, being observant before acting. But this depth of processing comes with a cost. More information absorbed means more material stored, and more material stored means more ammunition for the inner critic. The inner critic operates on a specific formula. Therapists have mapped it. Fact plus false conclusion. The fact is real. Something bad happened. A failure occurred. A rejection stung. That part is true. The false conclusion is what follows. Therefore, you're worthless. Therefore, you'll always fail. Therefore, you belong in the dark. The voice uses truth as a delivery system for lies. That's what makes it so convincing. Carl Jung described a version of this in his concept of the shadow, the unconscious part of the psyche containing everything a person rejects about themselves. For highly sensitive people, there's simply more material for the shadow to work with, more memories processed deeply, more pain absorbed fully, more ammunition stored. The show understood this mechanism with unusual precision. The villain doesn't attack randomly. He specifically targets people carrying unprocessed pain, guilt that was never resolved, grief that was never processed, shame that was never examined. He finds the wound. He speaks in the person's own voice. He uses their own memories against them. The pattern is almost clinical, and millions of viewers watched and recognized something familiar. The show resonates not because of the monsters, it resonates because of the mechanism. So that's how the voice operates, and why it targets certain people. But understanding the mechanism isn't the same as escaping it. For that, we need to look at a pattern that appears across mythology, psychology, and trauma research. In 1949, mythologist Joseph Campbell published The Hero with 1,000 Faces. He'd analysed myths from cultures across the world and found a recurring structure. Campbell called it the monomyth. The structure goes departure, initiation, return, or in simpler terms, breakdown, escape, return, transformation. Stage 1, breakdown. Transformation begins with destruction. The old way of being stops working. Campbell called this the call to adventure, often triggered by crisis, loss, or hitting a wall. For sensitive people, this stage hits harder. They don't just experience the breakdown, they feel it fully. Stage 2, escape. After breakdown comes escape. Getting out, finding safety, leaving the situation that caused the pain. This is where most people stop. They escape the external situation, but carry the internal pattern with them. New city, same 3 a.m. thoughts. New relationship, same insecurities. The voice travels. Stage 3, return, the stage most people skip. This is the critical stage, and the one most people avoid. Campbell wrote that the hero must return from the journey and integrate what was learned. But the return requires facing what was fled. Jung called this shadow integration, voluntarily confronting the rejected parts of the psyche. Not reliving trauma, but consciously processing it. This is where the voice loses its power. It weaponizes unprocessed material. When that material is consciously integrated, there's nothing left to use. Stage 4, transformation. What emerges from this process isn't just survival, it's something new. The person who completes the return doesn't go back to who they were before the breakdown. They become someone who has integrated the experience and gained capabilities they didn't have before. Stranger Things follows this structure with unusual precision across all 5 seasons. Characters who try to skip the return, who escape but don't integrate, stay stuck. The voice keeps finding them. Characters who voluntarily face what they buried, who go back into the darkness on their own terms, emerge transformed. The show isn't just using this pattern for drama, it's demonstrating why each stage matters. So that's the pattern: breakdown, escape, return, transformation. 4 stages. Most people stop at 2. But what actually happens to someone who goes all the way through? What do they become? In 1996, psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun at the University of North Carolina published research that documented something counterintuitive. They found that people who struggle with highly challenging life circumstances often develop positive psychological changes, not despite the struggle, but because of it. They called this phenomenon post-traumatic growth. Their research identified 5 areas where growth commonly occurs: increased appreciation for life, more meaningful relationships, recognition of new possibilities, greater sense of personal strength, spiritual or existential deepening. The key word is struggle. Growth doesn't come from the trauma itself, it comes from the cognitive processing of it, the return stage. When a highly sensitive person completes this process, something shifts. They don't become less sensitive. The research shows the opposite. Sensitivity remains, but its function changes. Before, sensitivity was a vulnerability. Every input was potential ammunition for the voice. After, sensitivity becomes a capability. The same depth of processing that once fed the inner critic now feeds intuition, empathy, and perception. This is what makes them dangerous, not aggression or hardness. Freedom. Freedom from the control that fear used to have. You can't manipulate someone through their insecurities when they've already faced those insecurities directly. You can't weaponize their past when they've already integrated it. By the finale, every character who was targeted for their sensitivity becomes essential. Their sensitivity gave them perception, others lacked. Their depth gave them resilience, others couldn't access. The thing the voice used against them became exactly what was needed. The kids everyone underestimated became the ones who mattered most. The show, the mythology, the research, they all point to the same conclusion. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've been told you're too sensitive, if the voice knows where you live, if you've wondered whether your depth is a defect, consider the possibility that you've had it backwards. The voice lied. It used real pain to sell a false conclusion. It said sensitivity was weakness. It said you belonged in the dark, but the same qualities that made you a target are the ones that make transformation possible. The depth that fed the voice is the same depth that enables growth. You're not broken, you're not too much, you might just be unfinished. And if the pattern holds, when you come out the other side, you'll be exactly what was needed. The transformation pattern described in this video has 4 stages. Most people get stuck at the same one, the return. If you want to understand why that stage is so difficult, and what actually helps people move through it, there's another video that breaks down the specific obstacles and how to navigate them. It's linked on screen now.